Good afternoon, dear friends, and happy to see you. And this is a fairy tale from Arabian Nights, the tale of Nur-al-DIN Ali and his son. In times gone by, the land of Egypt was ruled by a generous and just sultan, one who loved the pious and the poor, and who associated with ulema and learned men. Now he had a vizier who was wise and experienced in the affairs and art of government. This minister, who was a very old man, had two sons like two moons, for no one had ever seen such handsome and graceful young men. The elder was called Shams-al-Din Mohammed, and the younger Nur-al-Din Ali. Among the two, it was the younger who was more handsome and more pleasing, so that people heard about his fame in foreign countries, and men flocked to Egypt just for the purpose of seeing him. In the course of time, their father, the vizier, died and was deeply missed and mourned by the sultan, who sent for his two sons, and after presenting them with robes of honor, he said to them, "Don't trouble yourselves, for you shall both replace your father and be joint ministers of Egypt." Upon hearing this, they rejoiced, kissed the ground before him, and performed the ceremonial mourning for their father one whole month. After that time was over, they became viziers, and their father's office passed into their hands, with each doing his duty for a week at a time. They lived under the same roof, and their word was one. Whenever the sultan desired to travel, they took turns attending him. Now it happened one night that the sultan decided to set out on a journey the next morning, and the elder, whose turn it was to accompany him, was sitting and conversing with his brother, and said to him, "My brother, it's my wish that we both marry two sisters, and sleep with them on the same night, and they shall conceive on their wedding nights and bear children to us on the same day. And by Allah's will, your wife will bear you a son, and my wife will bear me a daughter. Then we'll wed them to each other, for they will be cousins. What dowry will you require from my son for your daughter?" Nur-al-Din asked. "I shall take 3,000 dinars, 3 pleasure gardens, and 3 farms," said Shams al-Din. "It would not be fitting if the youth agreed to take less than this." When Nur-al-Din heard this demand, he replied, "Is this the kind of dowry that you would impose on my son? Don't you realize that we are brothers, and both, by Allah's grace, vices and equal in office. It's really your duty to offer your daughter to my son without a marriage settlement. Or if one is necessary, then it should be nominal or a public gesture of some kind. Indeed, you know that the male is more valuable than the female, and our memory will be preserved by my son, not by your daughter. But what is she to have? Asked Shams al-Din. We won't be remembered among the lords of the earth through her, NUR-al-DIN stated. But I see you'd like to treat me according to the saying. If you want to bluff off a buyer, keep asking him for a higher price. Or do as a man did who needed something and went to a friend for help and was answered, "You are welcome to it, but come tomorrow and I'll give you what you need." Whereupon the other replied in verse, "When he who is asked a favor says tomorrow, the wise man knows 'tis vain to beg or borrow. Master, said Shams al-Din, I see that you don't respect me, since you are placing more value on your son than on my daughter, and it's plain to see that you lack manners and understanding. Let me remind you, as your elder brother, that I decided to let you share the vizier's office out of pity, not wishing to mortify you, so that you could help me as a kind of assistant. But by Allah, since you talk this way, I'll never marry my daughter to your son, never, not for her weight in gold." When NUR-al-DIN heard his brother's words, he became angry and said, "And I, too, will never marry my son to your daughter, even if it would mean my death." Shams al-Din replied, "I wouldn't accept him as a husband, since he isn't even worth the tip of your toenail. If I weren't about to travel, I would make an example of you. However, when I return, I'll show you how I can assert my dignity and vindicate my honor. But let Allah's will be done." When NUR-al-DIN heard all this from his brother, he became furious and lost his head, but he hid what he felt and held his peace. The brothers spent the night far apart from one another, each fuming with anger at the other. As soon as dawn arrived, the Sultan journeyed forth in state and crossed over from Cairo to Giza and headed for the pyramids, accompanied by the Vizier Shams al-Din, for it was his turn of duty. Meanwhile, his brother NUR-al-DIN, who had spent the night in rage, rose with the light and said the dawn prayer. Then he went to his treasury, took a small pair of saddlebags, and filled them with gold. All the while he recalled his brother's threats and the contempt that his brother had shown him, and he said to himself, "Travel, and you'll find new friends to replace the old ones left behind. There's no honor in staying at home." So he ordered one of his pages to saddle his Nubian mule. Now she was A dapple-gay mule, with ears like reed pens and legs like columns, and a back high and strong as a dome built on pillars. Her saddle was made of gold cloth and her stirrups of Indian steel. Indeed, she had trappings that could serve the cruisers, and she was like a bride adorned for her wedding night. Moreover, Nur-al-DIN ordered a piece of silk to be laid on her back for a seat along with a prayer carpet, under which were the saddlebags. When this was done, he said to his pages and slaves, "I intend to go on a small trip outside the city on the road of Kilib. I'll spend 3 nights away, and I don't want any of you to follow me, for there is something troubling my heart." Then he took some provisions for his journey, mounted the mule in haste, and led out from Cairo into the open and wild countryside around it. About noon he reached the city of Bilbay, where he dismounted and stayed a while to rest himself and his mule. After eating some of his victuals, he bought all that he needed for himself and his mule and continued on his journey. Toward nightfall, he entered a town called Saadiah, where he dismounted and ate some of his food. Then he spread his stirrup of silk on the sand and set the saddlebags under his head and slept in the open air, for he was still filled with anger. When morning arrived, he mounted and rode onward until he reached the holy city of Jerusalem, and from there he went to Aleppo, where he dismounted at one of the caravan stops and stayed 3 days to rest himself and the mule and taste the air. Determined to travel afar, he set out again, wandering without knowing where he was going. After having journeyed a group of courtiers, he kept traveling until he reached Basarah and did not even know what the place was. It was pitch black when he arrived at the Khan, so he spread out his prayer carpet, took down the saddlebags from the back of the mule, and told the doorkeeper to walk her about, and the porter did as he was requested to do. Now it so happened that the vizier of Basora, a very old man, was sitting at the lattice window of his mansion opposite the Khan, and he saw the porter walking the mule up and down. He was struck by her priceless trappings, and thought her a nice beast suited for viziers or even for royalty. The more he looked, the more he was perplexed, and he finally said to one of his pages, "Bring me the porter over there." The page went and returned with the porter, who kissed the ground, and the minister asked him, "Who is the owner of that mule you are walking, and what kind of man is he?" "My lord," he answered, "the owner of this mule is a handsome young man, very pleasant, but also grave and dignified. Undoubtedly he is one of the sons of the merchants." When the vizier heard the potter's words, he arose right away, mounted his horse, rode over to the khan, and entered it to see Nur-al-Din. As the minister advanced toward him, Nur-al-Din stood up and greeted him. The vizier welcomed him to Bassorah, embraced him, made him sit by his side, and asked, "My son, where have you come from, and what are you doing here?" "My lord," Nur-al-Din replied, "I've come from Cairo, where my father was the vizier, but he has died." And he continued to inform him of all that had happened to him from beginning to end, whereupon he added, "And now I'm determined never to return home until I have seen all the cities and countries of the world." When the vizier heard this, he said to him, "My son, don't let yourself be carried away by your emotions, or you'll become your own worst enemy. It makes no sense to wander aimlessly. Many regions are just wastelands, and I fear that fortune may turn against you." Then he had the saddlebags, the silk and the prayer carpets loaded on the mule, and brought Nur-al-Din to his own house, where he lodged him in a pleasant place, treated him honorably, and indulged him, for he was extremely fond of him. After a while the vizier said to him, "Here I am, a man rich in years, but I have no sons. Fortunately, Allah has blessed me with a daughter who can match you in her beauty. Now I've rejected all your suitors, men of rank and substance, but my affection for you has become deep, and I would like you to become your husband. If you accept, I'll go with you to the Sultan of Bassorah and tell him that you are my nephew, the son of my brother. I'll arrange it so that you will be appointed vizier in my place, so that I may keep the house, for I am stricken in years and have become weary." When Nur-al-Din heard the vizier's words, he bowed his head in modesty and said, "As you wish." At this the vizier rejoiced and ordered his servants to prepare a feast and decorate the great assembly hall in which they were accustomed to celebrate the marriages of emirs and nobles. Then he assembled the nobles of the realm, the merchants of Bassorah and his friends, and when they all stood before him, he said, "I had a brother who was a vizier in the land of Egypt, and Allah Almighty blessed him with 2 sons, while to me, as you all well know, he gave a daughter. My brother requested that I wed my daughter to one of his sons, and I agreed. Since my daughter is not of the age to marry, he sent me one of his sons, the young man now present, to whom I intend to marry her. So I am drawing up the contract and celebrating the night of unveiling with due ceremony, for he is nearer and dearer to me than a stranger. After the wedding, if it pleases him, he will dwell with me, for if he prefers, I will enable him to travel with his wife to his father's home." Upon hearing this, everyone rejoiced and was pleased by the vizier's choice of the bridegroom. Consequently, the vizier sent for the qazi and legal witnesses, and they wrote out the marriage contract. After which the slaves sprayed the guests with incense and soaked them with sherbet. Then they sprinkled them with rose water, and the people went their ways. Afterward, the vizier ordered his servants to take NUR-al-DIN to the hammam bath and send him a suit of his own best raiment, along with napkins, towels, bowls, perfume, burners, and everything else that was necessary. When NUR-al-DIN came out of the bath and donned the garments, he was just like the full moon on the 14th night. Thereupon he mounted his mule and went straight to the vizier's palace, where he dismounted and went in to see the minister and kissed his hands, and the vizier bade him welcome. And Shahrazad noticed that dawn was approaching and stopped telling her story. When the next night arrived, however, she received the king's permission to continue her tale. To be continued.